In this video, I want to share with you how I got started in photography. This is Bernal Heights Park in San Francisco. It's a big hill at the very bottom end of the Mission District, and it's very visible and prominent from the window of the apartment where I live. After I moved into the apartment a few years ago, I would see it out the window every day and wonder what park it was since I wasn't familiar with that part of town yet. It actually took a few years until I went up there. One day my partner and I took our dog and decided to go finally check it out. I took my GoPro camera with me because I wanted to get a nice shot of the city from the hill. And this is the best one that I came back with. It's really not as impressive as I had expected. The view looked a lot better there, and I just felt like I didn't have the control I needed with the simple GoPro camera to get a shot that really did the view justice. It's at this point I realized maybe I really needed something a little more advanced for a still camera. While the GoPro is very good for video, it's really intended for action sports and video over still photography. So after this, I decided I was going to look into what kind of DSLR I should get for my very first one. After a couple of days of research, I decided on the Canon EOS Rebel T7i, which is also known as the 800D in non-American markets. I generally refer to it as the 800D since that's the name most people seem to know it by. It took a while to research this, and I'm going to go into more detail in a later video on why I chose this particular camera. But it served me pretty well so far. It comes with a single lens in the kit, which you can see here is the EFS 18 to 55 millimeter zoom lens. So on a crop sensor camera like this one, it gives you a pretty decent wide-angle view and a zoom up into sort of a medium telephoto range. After I got the camera, I decided to walk through the Mission District and take some pictures. And this was the best photo I came back with from that day. Artwork on the left and the woman walking her dog on the right paints a very sort of classic picture of culture in the Mission District in San Francisco. Next, I went to Golden Gate Park and took some pretty amateur shots of flowers and trees and things like that. You can see here that in this shot of the flowers that I took, there's really no concrete subject here. There's no focus. I mean, there's lots of pretty flowers, but what exactly am I supposed to be looking at here? I even notice now that some of the flowers are out of focus, so I used an aperture that was too wide for what I was attempting to do. This is a good example of an early photo that I've taken where even just a few months later now I can look at it and realize that I've improved a lot, both in deciding what I'm going to shoot, how to frame it, and knowing the correct settings to use to get the results that I want. Here's another picture I took during my trip to Golden Gate Park that day. I think this one is funny because I heard another YouTuber refer to the initial phase of photography as the ducks in a pond phase, where you shoot a lot of things that are readily available, quite literally like ducks in a pond. So here is my duck in a pond. It's an okay photo. The duck is cute, but there's a lot of space in the photo that's not really useful, so this one could easily do with a crop, or could have used with a more zoomed in picture in the first place. And of course, my pug Carl is always a delight to photograph, so he came along with me to Golden Gate Park and had a good time romping through the trees and posed for this very nice portrait, which already showed the improvement in quality that a DSLR gave me over my cell phone camera. Shortly after that, I went down to Los Angeles to visit my family, and my brother, who's also been a photographer for about 10 years now, showed me his collection of gear and was kind enough to give me some hand-me-downs of stuff that he had purchased a long time ago that he wasn't using anymore. So he gave me a couple of extra lens caps with little anchors to keep them on your wrist or on the camera, a little set of close-up lenses to use for macro photography, which I'm sad to say I actually still haven't used. I'm only just starting to learn about macro photography now. He gave me a UV protector to put on my lens so I didn't have to worry about it getting scratched, and a circular polarizer that I could use in certain situations to cut out unwanted light from reflections or from the sky. And finally, he gave me a really nice strap which could be attached to the bottom of the camera on the tripod mount, and was a lot more sturdy. It could be worn over the shoulder more comfortably and more securely than the strap that came with the T7i. He also told me about some of his newer gear and this really cool company called Peak Design, which creates a lot of gear that's specifically for photographers. So I went down to the Peak Design retail store, which by beautiful coincidence is very close by to where I live in the Hayes Valley neighborhood of San Francisco. And I went in person to pick up two of their products, the clutch and the capture camera clip. It's not very well displayed here, but the capture clip is this little square piece of metal that you can attach to a belt or, as shown in the picture, a backpack strap or something like that. And then you mount the plate that attaches to it to the tripod mount on the bottom of your camera, and it just clicks into place and holds perfectly sturdily. And you can just pull it off your belt or whatever you want whenever you need it. And also the clutch above is a sort of a little one-sided handle that can easily be tightened around your hand to give you some extra grip when you're holding on, so that if you accidentally let go of the camera, it won't fall out of your hand onto the ground. Both of these have been really, really good, and I highly recommend them. I keep the capture clip on my belt all the time now. My partner makes fun of me because I look silly wearing this little metal clip on my belt even when I'm not using my camera. But I just find it's easier to leave it on the belt than it is to constantly unscrew it and take it on and off when I'm shooting a photo. Armed with my new capture clip and my new clutch strap seen here, I set out on another trip to do some photos. This time I took the F-line on Market Street down to the ferry building and the marina area. I took a few pictures that day there. This is one that at the time I really liked, of a street musician playing some guitar. Although now I realize that it's still not a great picture. Again, there's a lot of space on the left side of the frame that's not particularly useful. I think in my first attempts at street photography, I was being a little shy with getting close to people that I didn't know, because I felt sort of silly taking pictures of strangers. And there's a lot of people in the background that don't really add anything to the photo. Also, the man's eyes and top of his face are in shadow from the hat, so I probably could have gotten a better angle if I had worked this shot a little bit more. But at the time, I was pretty happy with this. This was my best photo from the day at the ferry building. This is the clock tower above the ferry building, as seen through some trees on the side of the building. This one was really nice because the trees kind of acted as sort of a natural frame for the clock tower and gave it a little bit of a more artistic sense than most of the other photos I shot that day, which seemed more like cell phone camera shots, no particular purpose other than documenting specifically what I had seen. It took me actually quite a while to get back to the original site back at Bernal Heights Park, where I had decided that I needed a quote-unquote real camera. I took some more photos that day, and although these still aren't great because I was still using the kit lens and didn't know how to do any processing at the time, you can already see that this is a much better representation of the view from Bernal Heights Park. There's not all of that extra stuff in the foreground. The tiny, tiny strip of city on the horizon is now much expanded. Of course, the shot itself is an entirely different composition, so it's maybe not entirely fair to compare this to what I was originally trying to do. But I think the difference in quality of the photograph is at least evident from seeing this one. And of course, I was, although not great at it yet, definitely paying more attention to composition and trying to capture something that would look nice in the frame rather than simply pointing the camera at whatever I was looking at and pressing the button. Last but not least, on the same day that I was at Bernal Heights Park with the DSLR, I was taking pictures of Sutro Tower, which is very visible in the west from Bernal Heights Park. And as I was starting to do this, as the sun was going down, the clouds started to roll in. I took a whole bunch of shots and managed to get this pretty cool one, although to my eye now it looks a little washed out and I think could use some good processing. But nevertheless, I really liked the way that the tower poked out through the clouds. So this was sort of the first month or so of using my new camera, and I'm really pleased to say that even maybe 4 months later, I'm able to really see the difference in both composition and processing quality of my photographs. I'll also be doing more in-depth discussion about the gear that I used and why I selected it. So never fear if you're wondering why, more specifically, I picked the T7i/800D and why I ended up getting the lenses I did and all this other gear. I'll do much more in-depth reviews of those later. Thanks for watching.